second part of the program. Thank you very much for your attendance and attention since the morning, and we trust that we'll continue to have that through the rest of the program. We'll be going into the seminar at this point, and my name is Olufonto. I'll be facilitating this session, and I'd like to call up for quick remarks. We'll start with my colleague, Mr. Graham Matenga. He's the head of programs for International Ideas, Africa and West Asia region. He'll come up and give his goodwill message now, and I would also call up the EU ambassador thereafter.
Thank you, Madam Director. Well, it feels great to be in Eswatini, as it has been described. This is heaven. So we are in heaven. I look forward to see cheerful faces in heaven. Heaven is a paradise, right? So allow me to also recognize already established protocols. The chairperson, the president of ECF-SADC, ambassador of European Union to the Kingdom of Eswatini, honorable chairpersons of elections commissions, ladies and gentlemen. It's now afternoon. Good afternoon. So on behalf of International IDEA, it is a great honor to be a partner to the 27th Annual General Conference on ECF-SADC. So year after year, building on previous conferences, last year we were in Seychelles. This distinguished forum affirms its indispensable role as the region's anchor for dialogue, collaboration, thought leadership on electoral integrity. So your work remains central to strengthening citizens' trust that democracy, despite its strains, remains the surest pathway to peaceful, legitimate, and accountable governance. So the conference theme, Artificial Intelligence and Elections, Threats and Opportunities, could not be more timely. Across our continent of Africa, millions are heading to the polls or preparing for elections at a moment when technology is reshaping political life at a pace we have never seen before. New tools powered by artificial intelligence, digital platforms, machine learning algorithms, and real-time data analytics are transforming how citizens engage, how information spreads, and how institutions must respond. As the writer, Yuval N. Harari reminds us, technology is never neutral. It empowers those who know how to use it. We have heard from previous speakers. So this truth rings loudly in the electoral space. AI has the potential to strengthen democracies, but equally to disrupt them. This duality reminds us of a simple but profound caution by Kofi Annan, that technology is a tool, and like all tools, it must be used to build and not to destroy. At International IDEA, through our EU-funded Strengthening Pan-African Capacities for Electoral Observation and Assistance, the project that we famously call SPEC, which is co-implemented in partnership with EISA, International IDEA works closely with African Union and regional EMBs to ensure that African elections remain credible in this rapidly evolving digital world. SPEC offers technical assistance, peer learning, capacity development, advisory services, and digital tools designed specifically to help EMBs strengthen transparency, accuracy, and public confidence in elections. Digitalization is now a core priority for us as an organization. So recently we published a policy brief aimed at helping EMBs understand the opportunities, legal considerations, and ethical implications associated with using AI in elections. Our position as an organization is very clear. AI must always be deployed within a framework that protects democratic principles, human rights, respect human rights, and uphold electoral integrity. While AI can enhance inclusivity, transparency, accountability, and citizens' participation, we must also be mindful of the emerging digital divide. Access to digital tools remains uneven across gender, geography, age, and socio-economic groups. If not managed carefully, digitalization could create new hierarchies of power, where those who are connected participate fully, while those without access are left behind. International IDEA is therefore committed to working with ECF-SADC and other partners to bridge this divide through documenting and sharing regional best practices, through co-developing ethical guidelines and regulatory approaches, supporting technology assessment frameworks, promoting responsible innovation, and strengthening capacity of EMBs to manage both the promise and the perils of artificial intelligence. As we continue, as we navigate the digital future, one principle must remain inviolable. Technology must never erode fundamental democratic rights. Elections must continue to adhere to international norms and standards that member states across the region have committed to. We acknowledge and applaud the work of the African Union high-level panel on emerging technologies, APET, which has highlighted the potential of AI to enhance voter engagement, strengthen communication between governments and citizens, and support more efficient and transparent electoral process. APET's vision is a reminder that Africa, may I repeat, APET's vision is a reminder that Africa is not merely a consumer of technology. We can also shape its development to meet our democratic aspirations as a continent. In conclusion, we meet at this conference not simply to discuss algorithms, digital tools, but to answer a deeper question. How do we ensure that technology, how do we ensure that AI strengthens democracy rather than undermining it? As one African proverb reminds us, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. Our gathering at this conference is therefore part of that preparation for the future. Let us use this moment to think boldly, share openly, and collaborate decisively. Let us ensure that AI becomes a force that reinforces electoral integrity, restores public trust, and empowers citizens, especially those that are marginalized. International IDEA is honored to stand with ECF-SADC, the EU, and regional partners as we collectively build an electoral ecosystem fit for this digital age. Together, we can make certain that technology serves democracy and not the other way around. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a productive and inspiring conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. It's my pleasure to call up His Excellency Karsten Mackenberg, the European Union Ambassador to the Kingdom of Eswatini.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Your Royal Highness. The ECF-SADC President and Deputy President, Chairpersons and Chief Executive Officers of the National Election Commissions, representatives of SADC and African Union Commission, senior government officials, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today at this event hosted by the Eswatini Election Boundary Commission and the Electoral Commissions Forum of the SADC countries. And I would like to thank you also for giving me the occasion to say a few words. I would also obviously like to thank IDEA. We just heard the representative for facilitating the organization of this event through the support notably granted by the European Union's continental program to the African Union and REX electoral institutions. This year, 2025, we mark the 25th anniversary of the European Union-African Union partnership, which was reaffirmed just last week in Angola on the occasion of the 7th AU-EU summit at the level of heads of states and government. Prime Minister Dlamini of Eswatini also attended. This is a relation between two unions, two partners which share common values and mutual interests. In Luanda, our respective heads of states and governments committed to further reinforce multilateralism and reaffirmed the strong linkages between governance, peace, and security. Indeed, in the current geopolitical context, it is more crucial than ever that our two unions invest in multilateralism, inclusive governance, peace, stability, and uphold strong commitment to an international order based on the respect of law and rules. Those are all key factors contributing to an enabling environment for investments and development as well. Those aspects lie at the heart of the European Union Global Gateway Strategy and our joint African Union-EU joint vision for 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the evolving of events of the current days serves as a reminder that democracy and peace are not for granted. They require a genuine and daily commitment in the spirit of our respective unions' founding fathers' principles. In the run-up to the last week's summit in Luanda, in October, the EU and the African Union had also engaged in high-level discussions at the occasion of the annual EU-AU Human Rights Dialogue and the joint meeting of the African Union Peace and Security Council, of which Eswatini now also is a member, and the EU Political and Security Committee. Both unions expressed concern over the increasing number of conflicts on the African continent and shared the view that root causes of instability are to be found notably in the deficit of accountable governance, unaddressed grievances, unattended requests to uphold the rule of law and social services. This is also in line with the African Union's Heads of State report on unconstitutional changes of government, approved at the 2023 African Union Summit. And I have noticed with appreciation the recent insistence of His Majesty, the King of Eswatini, on these findings. In this regard, the African Charter on Democracy, Governance and Election provides for a primary role for the African Union and the regional economic communities, the RECs, in engaging in electoral processes, especially in early warning, mediation, conflict prevention, and in ensuring credibility of electoral processes. In 2024 and 25, 17 and 11 elections respectively took place on the African continent. In 2026, 18 elections at the level of parliamentary and presidential elections are scheduled. Based on lessons learned, and especially violences following electoral processes, the African Union Commission, in coordination with the RECs and support from the European Union, has invested in deploying high-level preventive diplomacy actions with the conflict prevention mandate to some countries at risk of electoral violence: Malawi, Tanzania, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and Guinea-Bissau. The aim of those initiatives has been to operationalize the African Union conflict prevention strategy through a reinforced preventive diplomacy component. However, recent events show that continued support at peer-to-peer political level and combined with technical engagement is still very much needed. Despite democratic achievements, electoral integrity remains under question, linked to issues of peaceful transfer of power, post-election violence, which further undermines citizens' trust in ballots as the legitimate means to bring political change. The African Union Peace and Security Council, as well as think tank reports, for example, Afrobarometer and IDEA democracy reports, show that the overall context of the 2024-25 elections was characterized by a broader democratic decline in a context of economic challenges. Conversely, increased youth participation was recorded. Youth vote was mostly guided by aspirations for better economic opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, both the EU-AU Human Rights Dialogue and the Peace and Security meetings discussed the impact of disinformation affecting electoral processes, both in Europe and in Africa. Hybrid attacks have significantly increased in the recent years. Both the EU and the AU face those risks linked to digital technology and AI in fueling hate speech, disinformation, foreign interference, and manipulation during electoral processes. However, as highlighted by African Union Commissioner Bankole, addressing the digital challenges shall not become a reason to related violence. To conclude, this workshop contributes to awareness creation on the relevance of the digital information space in electoral processes and prepare electoral management bodies to adopt strategies to address the issue of mis- and disinformation and interference. And I would like to reiterate that this aspect is also of major interest for the European Union. We stand ready to continue collaborating on those aspects which have indeed no geographic boundaries. Thank you very much for your attention and good luck in your proceedings.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Without taking much time, we'll go into our first session of the day. Just to mention that this seminar, I think at this time last year when we had the first convening around the issue of AI and elections, the comments around the room were always around, there's very little known, there's very little research done, how much have different EMBs done with this, we want to know more. Interestingly, I think 1 year down the line, we have quite a bit out there and more case studies of use. So today we are privileged to have speakers in this first session, which aims to set the tone for this conversation. We'll have speakers that will speak to us from issues around regulatory frameworks for artificial intelligence. And we have a discussant that will bring perspectives from South Africa's, the IEC South Africa's examples. Thereafter, in the afternoon, we'll go into more detail around, one, regional regulatory frameworks and also emerging threats and opportunities. And in the afternoon, later on, we'll look more into futuristic questions. What is happening and what do we need to be doing differently? This morning, I'd like to call on Professor Guy Berger, who is a professor emeritus from the Rhodes University, South Africa. And he is voluntary convener of the African Alliance for Access to data, which gives particular attention to data and elections. The Alliance supports the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information in Africa in consultations and drafting for guidelines for governments in advancing data access on the continent, which instruments also include attention to the role of election management bodies. He will give an input that helps to set the scene. And thereafter, Mr. Simon Mabolo, the CEO of IEC South Africa, will give a response and also bring some perspectives from South Africa's experience. Prof, you have the floor.
Esteemed colleagues in the room, bon dia, bonjour, sunny banana. Good morning. I hope you're all well. You know, this is a very difficult assignment that they gave me. Me as a professor, it's the kind of punishment I give to students. Especially because Commissioner Moepe, he made the speech for me, so I had to think, what can I say different to him? What can I say different to what AI itself will tell you? And I had the good fortune on the weekend to go to Hlane Royal National Park in Eswatini. And I got some inspiration. And with the help of AI, I got some pictures. So that is what I will tell you about this. I invite you to take a journey. Some of you were in Seychelles last year. Perhaps you could indicate. Okay, quite a number of new people. I was there last year, and so in 1 year, let's see what has happened in the country called AI. We're going to visit AI land. What has changed between last year and this year? So in this journey, we'll look at first, where are we? Then we'll say, who owns this transport, the AI that is going to take us to the land of AI? Then we will look at what is the direction. Is it a national direction or is it an external direction? We'll try and figure out what's important on this journey. How will we have provisions for making that trip? What are the false flags along the way? We will have to dig for data, like digging for water, and then the lessons. So, our first stop before we even think of starting this journey is to look at the issue, the hopes and the hazards. Who hopes for sun? Who hopes for rain? Different people will have different hopes. This is what's important, I think, when we're going to look at this question of AI. It's a theme that goes all the way through. So my question to you is this. I'm going to ask 3 questions and I request you to vote. We will not keep a record. Everybody is entitled to vote. You can vote even twice. Is AI going to have, in the next 2 years, more negative impact on trust than positive? More positive than negative? Or you can't say. Number 1. Who would like to vote for number 1? Thank you. 1 person, 2 people, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who wants to vote for number 2? Okay, a couple. How many vote for number 3? Okay, I declare number 3 the winner of that particular poll. Well, I hope at the end of this we can begin to say a bit more. Another question then. Are EMBs on the AI back foot or on the front foot? Back foot? Yes? Front foot? No? Okay, well, I think this is very interesting because to be on the front foot means we have to be monitoring what is happening, and it's happening very fast. And we have to monitor what's happening in the world of AI, in the world of elections, and of course in your own country. So we do know that already there are huge challenges facing EMBs around the continent. I don't have to mention Tanzania as a recent experience, Mozambique, these are challenges. But now we have even more challenges. We have challenges that we're going to have to try and address on this journey. Okay, I have here a picture inspired by Klani Royal National Park. Now, the question is understanding this matter of risk. A risk for who? Okay, and the reason why I give you this picture is because I can first imagine yourselves as the lions. You're trying to catch the AI. The AI is at risk of being caught by yourselves. Or I can put it the other way around. That AI is the lion and you are the antelope. So this is, you always have to say who are the risks for, because they're different risks. Now, to move on to this thing, I would say that when you're looking at risks, to repeat the theme from earlier today, it's always the risks from the point of view of the voters. That is what I think you always need to do. You cannot have the risk for the ruling party. You cannot have the risk to foreign interests. It's a risk to the voters. So when you're assessing the risk, AI and its risk to this question of the voters. And when you're doing that, you have to assess, because every risk has a con. And every con has a risk. Okay. So you can find a problem that they overshadow. So for example, this antelope that's trying to keep its distance, there might be more lions. As we know, lions often have an ambush. It may, the cons may even undermine, so that you can be running, but you don't know that there's lots of cliffs and you can run over a cliff. So in these cases, you have to figure out, are the negatives going to outweigh any positives? And to try and sort that out, you've got to figure out that risk and plan what are the metrics to assess the risk. If you are the antelope running, you have to know, when I start smelling a lion, because you know these lions, they smell because they've got all this hair, the male lion. He smells because he has all the blood in his beard. So you've got to have metrics. You need to know when you smell. You need to know when you are in an environment, too many trees. You can't see what's going on. You need to know. Those are metrics. And then you have to, of course, do your mitigations. You have to move to another area, or you have to move away from the smell of the lion. So this is what it's about, trying to understand these opportunities and the pitfalls of AI from the point of view of whose interests, the interests of the voters. So let's look quickly where we are. And again, I'm now going to ask you to vote. You're experienced voters. Are your adversaries, those who wish ill upon your good work, the bona fides, are your adversaries using AI? Please indicate by a show of hands. Again, we're not going to report you. I'm very surprised not to see the South Africans here, because last year, in their election, they were the target of a lot of attempts to discredit them. And whether those adversaries are going to use AI is the big question now. Okay, do you think the political parties or political candidates are using AI? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let's look at the next one. Oops, sorry, go back. Is the media using AI? Okay. Are the voters using AI? Okay, so it sounds like there's quite a lot of yeses, that if we look at the landscape, a lot of these actors are using AI, or they could start using AI. So we come to you, okay? Now I put you here as a honeybird. What's it? A sunbird, because you are pollinating the flowers. I hope you like being a sunbird, not a lion. Anyway, so who of you says this, that you are using AI personally or professionally? Please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, quite a lot. Who is not using AI? One person there. Just one person. Okay, well, I have to tell you, dear sir, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are using AI, whether you know it or not. Because you maybe are not using generative AI to produce text, to produce images, to produce audio. But you're using AI every time you use like Google Maps. Each time you use a Google search and it's giving you an answer. Each time that you are using a translation, you're using some kind of AI. So, you know, you're in there. When you have social media, I assume probably you're using some social media, so even if it's only WhatsApp, well, there's AI in that. So you're using it, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not. So this is one question to you. Now the other question, this is a trick question. Okay, who says yes and who says no? Who says yes? Yes, yes, yes. Quite a number of yeses. Who says no? Okay, not many people say no. Well, if we think about AI, we think this is a very, very hungry creature. It had to use a lot of energy, a lot of investment to get high in the sky to look at what's down there, okay? It's very hungry. It's hungry for data. It's hungry for dollars. So when you're using this AI also has the question, how can it use you? Okay? This is a very interesting tool. This is not just a tool that you are using for your own purposes. It's also a tool of somebody else who's using you. Okay, so I think that's very important. That's something that we have learned very much in the past year. We've come to understand this more. Now, I think we've also come in the past year to realize that basically we need to be a bit more like the mongoose than the sleeping lion here. Okay. We need to realize that we've got to be on the alert, and we've got to be asking, whose tool is this? And I think a year ago we weren't necessarily so cautious. We thought, well, this stuff will just happen, it's okay, it'll work out. The politicians will figure it out, the business will figure it out, people will figure it out. Now we're a little bit more on our toes, as it were. So that's where we are. I think that we see a lot of other people in the environment using this. We also know it's using us, but we are more aware of all these things now. So let's go a bit more into how it's using us. Who owns this transport on the journey that we are doing? Now we know that AI can do very impressive magic tricks. You all know from African folklore this little animal. Okay, you know that he does very powerful magic. But we also have to think, in the case of AI, are there any strings attached? When you have these magic tricks coming, what is coming? Is it the moon? We know that the mantis and the moon, they have this relationship. Or do we have this? The moon as a mask. A mask for a musk. Now, I hope you people know, you're lucky I'm here because I came from South Africa. There's a genocide of white people there. Yeah. This man. If you use his AI, it says to you, there's a genocide, white people. I escaped just by the skin of my teeth. This is a man and his friends. They are not friends of African democracy. Let us keep that in mind. These are the most powerful AI companies. They are not friends of African democracy. In short, we have to look at who owns the transport. Because if we keep our heads in the sand, what happens to our eggs? Huh? They get taken. Okay, Let's look at the national direction then. And I think this is quite important. First, we can find who are the honey guides that can give us some advice here. I hope you have all had a chance to read this very, very, very important document, a very excellent document. There's also this very important document that, you know, from last year that many of you were involved in. Then there's two documents that I was involved in, not to sing my own trumpet too much, and I have a leaflet with a QR code here, so I can give that out. But these are very important pointers to understand this environment. As I said, if you want to actually know what's happening, if you want to be on the front foot, you have to be aware of these things. And then, of course, you must know your national AI strategies, cybersecurity, data privacy rules, cloud policies. Cloud, we think cloud is something up there. Cloud is computer infrastructure. Where is it? Who controls it? What is stored there? Who has access to it? And then the last resource I point out to you is this UN resource, came out earlier this year. A very good assessment from the UN Special Rapporteur. And in this, it also says, it advises EMBs to really collaborate with stakeholders, academics, computer scientists, data analysts, and so on. Okay. Now, having said this about understanding to some extent what are the resources, the guides, it's also important that we know what is this AI. Okay. Because the AI covers so many different things, and they all depend, they're all integrated. So if you start at the bottom, I mean, you can't have AI unless you have minerals, many of which come from Africa. You can't have the metals, the plastics. Then you need energy and water. As we know, Africa is not well endowed with those. Connectivity, cloud, that's where the data is stored. Chips, computer chips. And then you keep going up from data, talent, foundation models, applications, users, decisions, automated decisions, and then content. Of course, AI is not involved only in content production. AI is also involved in other things like cyber issues. AI is involved in automated decisions rather than producing information. What's important about understanding this very much is that it has a bearing on dependencies. If you're in China, you cannot access certain chips because the Americans control the chips. So, of course, that's going to affect what you can do higher up. You're going to have to really find workarounds for that. The point of showing you this complex tower is that you can't just harness a thing as if there's nothing underneath it, because what's underneath it can limit what you can do higher up. If it's not trained in African languages, it's going to be limited. Okay. If it's trained with a lot of pornography, it's going to produce some pornography, so on and so forth. So this is understanding where you can intervene. I think this is what's very important. And I think that some of these areas that are possible, which I'll go into a little bit shortly, data, talent, although talent we have brain drain, of course, in Africa. We have applications, we have users, we have decisions, and we have content. Anyway, keeping in mind now this question of who owns AI, most AI, and the imaginary and real power, because AI is not necessarily as powerful as it's often hyped to be, but the hype is powerful. I bet you in the next year, somebody in an African country will say the election was stolen because of AI. Whether it's true or not, people can believe that because of the hype around AI. So do you take flight or do you fight? Now, if you want to fight, you have to know what's important, and that means doing some kind of readiness assessment. I was going to ask you to do this, but I know I'm under pressure of time here. But I was going to ask you to say, is this high, medium, or low for your readiness? Are you ready as an EMB in terms of infrastructure, cybersecurity, vendor management? Are you ready organizationally? Do you have a vision and a strategy? Are you ready in terms of complying with various laws? privacy laws, data protection laws, even consumer rights. If a person has a decision made, can they go a decision made about their eligibility to vote? Who can they appeal to? Data governance. Are you ready in those areas? Are you ready operationally? Are you ready with stakeholder engagement and communication? These are very important questions. Are you ready with the risk framework? Because some risks might be more with some uses of AI or some kinds of AI, and some might be others. So the fact that you use AI in one respect doesn't mean you have a cascading risk all over. You have to be very granular in this risk analysis, keeping in mind some common elements. Okay. You have to identify on this journey what's the most important animal. What is your rhino that you want to protect? And you want to nurture, you want to breed, you want to encourage your rhinos. Any suggestions? What is your AI? What is your rhino in the light of AI? Okay, well, to me it's public trust. Because this is the easiest thing to lose. And once you lose that, you lose your power over EMB. AI, this is, to my mind, one of the biggest threats. And how it can impact is at a more concrete level. But the overall impact is your rhino is going to die. If your rhino dies, it means you lose the confidence of the. So these are some of the things that can potentially influence you. These are the AI snakes that could come there in voter registration. I'll go into this in a little bit of detail just now. Authentication, election monitoring, and vote tallying. I mean, this is your bread and butter business, you know all this. But it's important to do then risk analyses for each of these in terms of what AI application and what dependency you have. In this regard, you have to be careful because whatever seeds you plant this year or next year relevant to AI are going to grow into things. Some will be grass and some will be weeds. So you need to think to yourself, if you're going to have AI-driven voter list management, how is that going to change the way you do it at the moment? What could go wrong? Lots of things could go wrong. Can you mitigate them? When you use biometric systems to authenticate voters, how can that impact privacy, the confidentiality of the vote, inclusion? Because also these AI systems, we know, facial recognition, they are very much trained in the West. There are very few people with dark skins that are fundamental. So these systems are not good at recognizing African people, biometrics. That can lead to problems. And then, if you think more creatively, voter education, and you can use AI to make some games to really mobilize young people to participate. Okay, could it work? What could the risks be? Because we know these AI systems often make mistakes. For example, they take information from one country about mail-in ballots, and they tell you, you ask here, and they'll tell you in Africa, you know, the mail-in system like this. And most African countries don't have a mail-in ballot system, at least not for the people in the country. Okay, I'm nearly finished, so let me just go here. This is very important, and I'm glad that we are here now 1 year later, because this is, when you're going to invest in some AI, it doesn't mean that you're going to save money. You're not going to necessarily retrench a lot of your staff and use that money. It could be an extra expense. So first of all, you're going to have to figure out paying for risk assessments. Then you have to figure out more data security. Then you're going to have to figure out procuring the models. Now, I say here transparent models, by which I mean open source models. These are not proprietary models. Open source models, they need a lot more customization. That will take engineers. It's expensive, but maybe in the long term, you're not dependent on a company that can suddenly start charging you. Human oversight, you're going to need some more human oversight. You're going to need continued monitoring. And you're going to need capacity building. So in other words, this is quite a costly exercise. yes, there could be some benefits, but you also have to figure out what is the cost in relation to the benefit. And then procurement, this is very important, MC. Buyer beware. Procurement, this is stuff I did some research for the G20 this year. Provenance and quality of the data used to train AI systems. If you're going to buy an AI system, you need to know what did they train the data on. Are there copyright claims on that data that you will have problems with? Are there other issues with that data that is going to cause you problems? You have to ask these vendors, did they stress test in the case of hacking or prompt engineering? So you have to get that information from them. They've got to convince you that they stress test and they're red teamed. You have to ask them also the new data, because AI is generating new data. Who owns that data? Don't take for granted you own it, because that data is going back to the AI company. So don't take it for granted that they won't use that for the other purposes. And then data sharing. For example, I just know in South Africa, the IEC is sharing data with the public broadcaster, the SABC. Maybe you suddenly find you've bought a system, AI system. They say, no, you want to share this, you must pay extra. So these are some of the things, the buyer beware. Good to know at the outset, path dependencies. I really want to mention this point. You have probably heard recently the US government declared sanctions on the lead prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. As a result of that, Microsoft canceled his email side of... Okay, I won't go through these because of time, but I'm going to just touch on the data is very important side. As you heard also, I'm into this data story. So I hope you can see it doesn't work, okay? Even though it's trained on data, it's going to be used in relation to new data. Unless we can get more data unlocked, these systems are going to... And then LLMs, languages, because you need data in the languages spoken by people. And that is a big policy, political question and everything else. Engine fuel, the data budget's also going to cost you. To collect the data, to manage it, data verification, data access, capacity building. So again, I'm just reminding you of these unfortunate realities of having to pay. Okay, and then keep the ants under scrutiny. I won't spend time on this, but just to say that when you're looking at this data, you might want your real-time data, cybersecurity. You need to know in real time, are there AI-generated infused threats that are coming? Polling station monitoring, etc. Then frequent batch, that's less real urgent, and then periodic. Okay, well, false flags, I've got half a second on this. You all know this, I'm not going to speak more about it, but you do know that one locust is a problem. But the real problem is many locusts. And so one locust can be done with generative AI. But the distribution, that's a different story. And that's where your Facebooks, your TikToks, your YouTubes, etc. come in. Because they are the ones that enable the locusts to grow out of the one thing. So maybe it's something that ECF can do, Madame Borisani. Convene a meeting with all these big tech companies on behalf of SADC and say, how can we develop an MOU with you, the big tech, so that we don't have locusts flying in the elections? Okay. So just to conclude, there we are, lessons. This is a lengthy migration, very complex. You're going to also figure out who's taking responsibility, because at the end of the day, this thing can cost a lot of money, it can cause a lot of problems. Do you go fast or slow in this? So my concluding thought is that the world is moving fast. That means you have to be ready to react fast. So you need to have, if there is a deep fake, but CEO Mama Bolo, the IEC's got to be on the ball to respond to that ASAP. Speak to the social media, speak to the media, put it out on its own website. You can't just be there waiting. You've got to move fast there. But that is adapting to the world of AI. I would distinguish adapting and adopting. It's just the difference of one letter. Adapting with an A, adopting with an O. Go fast in adapting, go slow in adopting. That is my advice to you. So thank you very much. As you saw, we went on this journey. I hope I'm not going to be penalized later by our MC. But thank you very much, and I'll give out copies of this later. I'm happy to hear the response.
Thank you very much, Prof. I'm actually looking to the CEO. You have the floor for your response. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and I stand on the protocol as observed. I think one of the effects of the presentation we just received is to promote a cautious approach insofar as the adoption of AI is concerned. And I think that caution is quite opposite, because the adoption of AI has far-reaching consequences for EMBs. And the misgivings and perhaps the apprehensions we have about the adoption of AI are quite opposite. So they're well motivated by and borne out by some of the experiences EMBs have experienced in the last cycle of elections. Having said so, though, it is also important to note that there's already a pervasive use of AI in many different areas of human endeavor. From basic use of Copilot during virtual meetings to generate draft minutes and so on, through the whole spectrum to the creation of content using generative AI. So in a sense, EMBs can no longer ignore the use of AI. They have to be conscious about what they're adopting, for what business purpose, and how that is going to unfold. For that purpose, I want to propose a few guardrails that I think will be important for EMBs as they consider the question of possible adoption of AI. And the first guardrail I want to propose is consideration around confidentiality, privacy, integrity, and availability as a guiding principle on whatever AI model is used within the EMB. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And availability here transcends different social and economic milieu in which our voters are found. So it's availability across the uneven terrain that characterized our human settlement patterns within our countries. Secondly, in considering, is that, oh, okay. Yes. No. I didn't sleep preparing. So then the second guardrail is that formal policies are required within EMBs. And those policies must include ethical use of AI. And the reason why you need a formal policy on AI, including the ethical use of AI, is that absent such a policy, there may be abuse by even our own staff. They may abuse the data of voters to which they're exposed in their normal course of daily work. Third guardrail is that AI adoption must be approached with an organization-wide education and training module on AI ethical practices. We cannot assume that all staff have the consciousness to understand the ethical use of AI. Even the fact that there is an even understanding of what AI is and how AI works. So there is a need for an organization-wide education and training on the ethical use of AI within our own institutions. The fourth guardrail that I wish to propose is that when problems abound within organizations, there's a lot of enthusiasm about AI. You'll hear colleagues say, yeah, let's use AI, it will solve this within a minute. As if AI is a silver bullet to all problems. AI is not a panacea to all institutional difficulties and challenges. So it is quite important that, in the organizational life, there's a deep appreciation of the fact that AI won't solve all the problems that may be within our institutions. And then fifthly, the fifth guardrail is that we do not bolt AI onto existing technologies. There has to be a plan of intentional integration with your existing technology. Which means not all AI products may be relevant to your own technology. Some of them may just be irrelevant, or even if relevant, they may not be compatible with your own existing technology. So internal integration into your existing technology. But importantly, it is important that sensitive data, especially data about voters and candidates and so on, does not reside with the AI model. It's very, very crucial that you create a construction where key data about private details of voters, candidates, I would go even further to say service providers and so on should not reside with the AI model that you employ. Sixthly, the adoption of AI must be guided by the legal frameworks, different legal frameworks pertaining to protection of personal information. But in order to give life to this notion of the protection of personal information, you would need a data classification framework, because that data classification framework will guide you as to what type of data will have to remain on premise, what kind of data may go to the cloud, and what kind of data can be used within an AI model. Otherwise, if you don't have that data classification framework, you may end up with a situation where everything goes into an AI model without the necessary protections that are required. Number 7, and I guess this is the most important of all, human oversight remains essential. AI must support and not replace human judgment in electoral processes. In other words, AI recommends to a human being who ultimately should make the decision. So the construction of your AI models were used must be such that they give you the analysis you require for the human mind to ultimately make the decision. So human oversight is indispensable in the electoral context. Yeah, I see you. I see Olufonto. Now I'm confused. I no longer see my document. But the eighth guardrail is performance of risk assessment, which I won't belabor because Professor Berger spoke to that at length. My last comment is that the adoption of AI into our institution necessarily means that there has to be change in the skill set of some of our technicians. AI adoption and its use calls for a different skill set that may not be resident within the EMB at the moment. Thank you very much.
My sincere apologies for distracting your thoughts midway, but I was also under pressure from Hilda on the other side. But thank you so much, CEO, for your intervention. And I would say you raised very key points beyond just the issue of the risk assessment. I think the one I like the most is the essentiality of human judgment. The fact that we still need human supervision, regardless of how much we use AI. And I think the prof, not that I think, prof said clearly about adaptation and adoption. Which one should go slow and which one should go fast. And those were, two key things. initially we had thought of having this session, which would just set the scene, and then we'll take a break and come back to have more detailed interactions. But the Hilda has given me permission to take 3 questions or comments from the floor. If you all promise me to make it very fast, and then we'll have Prof and the CEO respond, and we can go for lunch. So you're standing between me and lunch, so you all promise to make it quick. So can I have show of hands for questions or comments to the speakers from this particular panel? So it seems lunch is winning. Oh, okay. I see you, ma'am. Let me just see how many hands we have, or maybe you would inspire more. Okay, go ahead, ma'am, please. And you can just say your name and country, so that we.
Good afternoon, everyone in the room. My name is Wendy Didon from Seychelles EMB. Just a quick question with regards to, let's say an institution, an EMB, decide not to go for AI at all. Would this be a wise route to take or to embark on, not to take, just continue as everyday work is going on, just the natural, normal way of doing it, and don't consider AI at all? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, from Seychelles. I saw Grenville, and I saw CEO from Lesotho, but we'll go first.
Thank you, Olifonto. Notwithstanding the concerns or the risk, should one not be using an opportunity like this to dream a bit bigger? And what I mean by that is, instead of having the fears of data colonization and bias and all of that, which are influenced not by ourselves, but by external forces. And to circumnavigate that, should we not be focusing on, and this is really dreaming big, building our own infrastructure, building our own AI machinery, training our own AI for our specific needs, so that you mitigate, those influences that could lead to data loss and all of those things. Because they are always going to be around, but having a fear for that does not mean that as EMBs, we are going to be protected in any way, because this is only one player in the electoral sphere, EMBs. There are many others, and they may have a bigger appetite for risk, and that may just give them the competitive edge, which adds further pressure on EMBs. Thank you.
Thank you, Grenville.
Thank you very much. Some people look at, and maybe I'm directing this at the Prof. Some people look at AI or describe AI as agency. It's a principle of agency. And what do I mean by agency? Obviously, that you are subcontracting certain work to technology, if you like. Now, specific to my question now is, to what extent do we feel that now we would be somehow, I don't know whether to use the word absconding or letting go of the trust that is bestowed upon us to lead EMBs and to actually give certain policy directions in a certain way. to what extent would you say that with that principle of agency, we are somehow losing control or letting go of what is actually entrusted to us? And do we have the legal framework that so allows for us to let go, particularly when you look at generative AI? It's actually then taking it to the next level, where it's not just about those algorithms which process the data as it is, but they even give you potential future insights which may not necessarily be within your immediate scope of control. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We promised 3, but I saw Botswana, and you promised me 1 minute of the question.
1 minute. Mine will be 30 seconds. Right. We have a lot of mistrust in Africa, particularly here in Southern Africa. My question is, are we then able to have a conversation around technology with elections, particularly in the advent of rigging and all sorts of allegations that we normally come across during elections time? Thank you.
Thank
20
you.
seconds.
Thank you very much. Prof, should I give? No, but maybe I should ask Sai to come first, and then Prof, and then we close the session. Is it working? Where are my tech people? We need AI assistance.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question.
Use the AI. Yeah.
Yeah. It's open to any institution to decide proactively whether there's a need for the adoption of AI or not. In other words, there shouldn't be any compulsion, so to speak, forcing an institution to adopt AI. However, your staff may already be using it. As Prof indicated, when you Google a word, in a business, personal context, you are already employing AI. So, whilst you may take a decision not to move in that direction, there are daily applications of AI which are unavoidable, both in a private and organizational sense. Granville, yes, dreaming bigger, well, let's start off by saying dreams are good because they create visions about the future that otherwise we may not have. But your question really calls for cooperation across jurisdictions, cooperation with governments, and so on, to build that type of own AI machinery, because it will require a lot of dollar-based investments. It will require a lot of technology that does not reside in the continent. You either get it in the West or in the East. But it is possible, and such a dream can be pursued. And I think what Prof was proposing, that convening tech companies at the level of ECF, I think will give us a better voice to convene and engage those tech companies. And that could be a springboard for such a dream. The question about trust, I think we are having to deliver on our mandates in a context where there's democratic decline. And one of the practical manifestation of that democratic decline is the attacks on institutions of governance. In that regard, EMBs are not immune. So it's not only happening in Botswana, it's happening in South Africa, Lesotho, and so on. But it's really a practical manifestation of the democratic decline that we are experiencing. My view is that EMBs should not be afraid to do the things that they ought to in order to serve the voter better because of the attacks on commissions. Because once you are in that state of inertia, you are actually saying to those that are attacking commissions, you give them victory and allow a situation of paralysis. Once the commission has done the assessments, they've implemented the guardrails and so on, they're entitled to make a decision to adopt or not to adopt on their own in terms of their own internal governance. Because were we to wait for parties to authorize our adoption or otherwise, we will never see the type of innovation and improvements that are required. I think the last question was for the Prof from my friend in Lesotho.
Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, thank you for the points, comments, questions. Indeed, we see so much hype about AI, and we forget where this is coming from. It's coming from the world's biggest investments are going into this kind of technology, and they want returns. So of course, the thing is being pushed. It's not just hype that's intrinsic to the technology. It's because of the investment that's trying to make money out of this thing. And so we really need to be quite careful about just feeling, oh, we're losing out, Africa's falling behind. Because this thing is a racket, and actually, it's not a complete racket, but even in the US, they find that companies, not state bodies, companies that have fallen for the hype, they're not getting the returns that they were thinking they would get. There are many studies now that are showing this. So there's no harm in taking it slowly. And I think it's important to be problem-driven and opportunity-driven. So, for example, you can use some AI technology to look for anomalies in voting results. But maybe that's not a problem in the Seychelles. Maybe it's never been a problem. So why would you want to go and invest in that activity if that's not a problem? On the other hand, maybe you want to get youth to vote more, so then maybe you can use, or you want to understand different turnout patterns. Maybe you can, but how urgent is it? That's the question, because it's going to cost you more than it's going to necessarily benefit you. As I say, you're not going to be able to suddenly make do with less people. You can have more productive people, but you still have to pay their salaries. But now you're supposed to pay for all the costs of that technology and monitoring and cybersecurity and everything else. On the question of building own infrastructure, there is, I think people have heard this concept, digital public infrastructure, that India put on the agenda of the G20. And then Brazil took it, and now it's going further with the South African G20. This digital public infrastructure is exactly that aspiration. And the problems that people are seeing now of dependency that undermines your national sovereignty, this is really giving some impetus to it. But it's much bigger than an EMB. It requires a national investment, technology, strategy, data science strategy, and everything else. But if this starts happening in some countries, by all means, I think EMBs should put their input into it. the question of agency, yeah, I think that the challenge with this is that you could say we used to write with a pen. Now, then we start to do with a typewriter. So we're giving agency to the typewriter to do the characters. But a typewriter was not taking our data. Now, an electronic keyboard or your cell phone, it's taking your data. So it's not just you using it, it's a different kind of ball game. And then the question is, so who takes responsibility then? I think CEO Mamabolo said it well, about do people understand the ethics of putting stuff into these systems, which is not just to get your result out, but you're giving away some stuff that could be quite sensitive. So I come back to the one point I made, that in an organization, experiment by all means where it's going to make some sense, opportunity, or dealing with a problem. But somebody must take responsibility for that. Because it can't just be that the EMB says, well, sorry, our data got leaked, or sorry, we had a system that suddenly deregistered a lot of voters because the system went wrong. Somebody must take responsibility, and that is the human in the loop, not only for appeal, but to take responsibility. On the question from, I think it was Botswana, maybe we could have a bilateral, because I'm not sure I understood completely. Maybe you were too pushed to be very concise. So could we take it later, or could he repeat very quickly?
Okay, I'll try repeat within 10 seconds. My question is, we are in Africa, particularly Southern Africa, and there's a lot of mistrust and allegations of voter rigging and stuff. So are we ready to begin a conversation around AI in the midst of all that?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, I did actually get you right the first time, so I should have tried to respond. Well, I think part of the mistrust is related to many, many, many points, but one of them is the rise of social media and all this anything goes on social media. And for EMBs to understand that means trying to monitor that. And how do you monitor that? It's very complex, but AI systems can help with a bit of monitoring, provided you also have cooperation from the companies. Because the companies do not allow anybody just to scrape what is there and analyze it en masse. But the only way that you're going to see, is there an organized conspiracy here to discredit the EMB? Or is there widespread ignorance? Is if you can get the data and do big data analysis, data analytics, I think was mentioned. So for that, AI can be useful in trying to monitor that. But it's as a application that you can use to try and make this analysis. It's not enough, you need the data also. So you come back to that question, and maybe pushing these tech companies, at least the distribution ones, to have some agreement with, as a block, SADC members, to say they will give you access to their back end. They can also even give you some technical support, make some data science available to analyze certain questions that you want to understand about mistrust.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thanks, Sai, for your great inputs in this session. And thanks for everyone for your attention and patience. It is lunch hour, but just to mention very quickly that what the value added for these sessions that we have is the knowledge that we can share, the experiences we share here, and also the opportunity to document that knowledge. So we have the report from last year's seminar, and it's available online. We have some, and there was also a policy brief from that seminar as well. So we've tried to just scroll the QR codes for those documents. You can always look through, and you can always download and read. We will take a lunch break now for an hour. We'll be back here at 2:30. We are going to have lunch in 2 groups. The first group will be for the EMBs and the international partners in the room. Lunch will be served at the pool area. There's a restaurant at the pool area. Colleagues outside will direct us accordingly. And then for the second group, it will be for nationals of Eswatini, so national guests who are in the room. There's a restaurant downstairs, and that's where lunch will be served for you. Am I correct, Hilda? And would return here at 2:30. So you can just ask the colleagues outside for directions on how to get to the 2 restaurants. Please confirm if everyone in the room has a voucher for lunch. You have a lunch voucher already? Do you or who doesn't have? Maybe that's the right question. You don't have a lunch voucher? Okay, so I believe everyone has, and we'll see you all at 2:30. Thank you very much.